She was wiping tables in silence when the grand piano behind her began to whisper her name, dragging a forgotten part of her soul back into the light. No one knew the Waitress used to fill concert halls. Tonight, they'd find out. It was a warm Friday evening when the air felt thicker than usual, not from the heat, but from the invisible weight of expectations, secrets, and unspoken dreams that floated between the clinking glasses and low jazz murmuring through La Fontaine. The restaurant was exquisite, no doubt, a haven of white linen tables, crystal glassware, and well-rehearsed elegance nestled in the heart of Raleigh, North Carolina. Deborah moved through it like a quiet flame, graceful, contained, but unmistakably present. At 25, she was the kind of woman people glanced at but rarely noticed, as if the world hadn't decided yet whether she belonged in the shadows or the spotlight. She wore the same black apron and practiced smile as the others, but there was a certain rhythm in the way she stepped, like her body remembered music, even when her heart had to forget it. To most, she was just another waitress. Efficient, pleasant, forgettable. But inside her, there lived a symphony of dreams waiting for their moment to be heard. Deborah hadn't always served tables. Once, not too long ago, her days were measured in melodies, not meal tickets. Back in a quiet South Carolina town, she had found her soul in the keys of a worn-out upright piano, gifted by an old neighbor who saw something in her that the rest of the world was too busy to notice. She taught herself to play with the kind of hunger that couldn't be taught, a hunger born from empty cupboards, quiet sacrifices, and a mother who worked double shifts so her children could dream a little longer. Deborah didn't just play music, she became it. Every note was a memory, every chord a confession. Her fingers told stories her voice never dared speak aloud. But life has a way of interrupting even the most beautiful melodies. Scholarships slipped through her fingers. The Music Academy sent polite rejections. Rent needed paying. Groceries didn't care how well she could play Beethoven. So she packed up her dreams and replaced them with double shifts and customer smiles. But even then, she searched for places where music still lived, like the grand piano in the corner of La Fontaine. She had asked about the job not because it paid better than the others, but because she had heard, through a former classmate, through whispered hope, that there was a piano there. It wasn't often played, sometimes a jazz trio on weekends. Mostly, it sat silent, like her talent, dust gathering on both. But she knew it was there. That was enough to keep her breathing. That night, as the sun dipped behind the skyline and the first round of entrees began to circulate, the front doors opened with the kind of flourish that only one man in town could manage. Leonard Grayson. The name alone made her blood cool by a few degrees. He was a known quantity around Raleigh, wealthy, arrogant, and hungry for attention in the way only a man who had everything could be. People whispered about him the way they did about storms, loud, unpredictable, and usually leaving some kind of damage behind. He didn't walk into rooms. He conquered them. And as he crossed La Fontaine's threshold, flanked by two sharply dressed companions and a woman who looked like she'd stepped out of a designer ad, the atmosphere shifted. Servers straightened, patrons paused. Even the jazz pianist faltered for a beat before continuing. Deborah didn't flinch. She had seen worse than men like Leonard. But what she didn't know was that tonight, she wasn't just going to serve his table. She was going to become his target. Leonard scanned the room with the hungry eyes of a man bored with his own power. And then his gaze landed on her. Just for a moment. But long enough for Deborah to feel it like a thread wrapping around her spine. She looked away, brushing it off, just another customer, just another shift. She had no time for games. But Leonard had already decided he was going to have a little fun. He ordered the most expensive scotch on the menu and cracked a joke loud enough for half the restaurant to hear. Laughter followed, shallow and obedient. Deborah brought the drinks, smiling politely. "Deborah," he said, reading her name tag like he was tasting it. "That's a name with mystery," he added, leaning back. "You strike me as someone with hidden talents." She offered a polite nod, already stepping away. She didn't see the smirk exchanged between Leonard and his friend. But it wasn't admiration in his eyes. It was the look of a man who had just chosen his next performance. And Deborah was the stage. She didn't know what was coming, but her body felt it. Some quiet dread curling in her stomach, whispering that tonight wouldn't end like the others. As appetizers rolled out and laughter resumed, Leonard began holding court, loudly regaling his companions with stories of takeovers and betrayals masked as business. He laughed hardest at his own cruelty. "You know what the problem is with people these days?" he asked his table, his voice slicing through the restaurant. "They have dreams bigger than their talent." The comment wasn't random. It was bait. Deborah returned with a wine bottle, and he struck. "So, Deborah," he said, eyes gleaming like a trap, "what do you do when you're not refilling glasses? Surely someone with your poise has aspirations." She froze slightly, then answered softly, "I play piano, sometimes." "A pianist?" he said, pretending surprise. "Now that is fascinating." He leaned in closer, voice rising just enough. "How about you give us a little concert?" The room quieted, just slightly, but enough. Deborah's heart thudded against her ribs. "I couldn't," she replied quickly, half laughing. "I'm working tonight." Leonard waved his hand. "Nonsense! There's a piano right there! Let's hear this hidden genius!" Laughter again, from his table, then scattered across the room. She felt it then, the spotlight, the snickering, the silent dare. Her throat tightened. She wanted to say no, to walk away, to bury the moment and let it pass like so many humiliations before. But then Leonard leaned back in his chair and said it, the words that sliced deeper than she expected. "Ah, I see. All talk, no talent. Disappointing, really." It was a mockery, but worse, it was a dismissal, like she was nothing. And suddenly she wasn't just standing in a restaurant. She was 10 again, standing in front of a cracked mirror, telling herself that one day the world would hear her. She glanced at the piano, then back at him. "Fine. I'll play," she said quietly, voice steady, but her eyes were fire. Every sound in the restaurant seemed to vanish as she walked toward the grand piano. The air shifted. Even the silverware stopped clinking. She sat, her fingers hovering over the keys. And for a breathless second, no one moved. Leonard sipped his scotch, smirking. He thought this was the punchline. He had no idea. Deborah closed her eyes, let the noise of the room fall away. She remembered her mother humming in the kitchen, remembered playing for her siblings on stormy nights, remembered the cold rejection letters and the warm hope that refused to die. Then she began to play. Not loudly, not flamboyantly, softly, tenderly, like a story being whispered directly into the soul. The notes drifted into the room like mist, and something unexplainable happened. Silence. Real, total silence. People stopped eating, forks lowered. The woman at table 7 blinked back tears. The bartender leaned forward, forgetting the cocktail shaker in his hand. Even Leonard's smirk faltered. Deborah didn't see them. She was gone, lost in the music, her fingers dancing, like they remembered who she truly was. Each note was defiance. Each chord, a declaration. She poured herself into the melody like it was the only thing keeping her alive. And maybe it was. The song rose and swelled and broke and healed. By the time she reached the final chord, the air felt different. Heavier. Holier. She lifted her hands, and for a full, unbroken moment, no one dared breathe. Then, applause, thunderous, immediate, honest, not the polite claps of dinner theater, but something else. Reverence. Some patrons stood, clapping harder than they had for any concert in years. Her co-workers, those who had only ever known her as Deb from Section B, looked at her like they were seeing her for the first time. Leonard sat still, hands clasped, the expression on his face unreadable, no longer smug, not quite humbled, just exposed. The crowd didn't care. They had heard something true, and it had changed them. Deborah stood, her knees trembling, but her spine impossibly straight. She didn't look at Leonard. She didn't need to. The music had already answered him. As she walked back to the kitchen, a woman caught her hand. "You're not a waitress," the woman whispered. "You're a miracle." Deborah didn't speak. She just smiled. But in her chest, something cracked open. Something that had been locked away for years, and now it was awake. The next morning, the sun rose quietly, as if the world itself was still catching its breath from the night before. Deborah sat at the edge of her bed, staring at her calloused fingertips. They ached in a way that only truth could cause. She hadn't played like that in years. And yet, something inside her had remembered every note, every pause, every place where her soul knew how to bleed. She didn't sleep much. How could she? Her phone had buzzed all night. Texts from co-workers, missed calls from numbers she didn't recognize, a voicemail from the restaurant manager asking her to call him as soon as you can. She didn't answer any of them. Not yet. She just sat there, fingers curled into her palms, wondering if what had happened was real. It felt like a dream, until she opened her door to leave for her morning shift and found the newspaper. She never read it. Didn't have time. But today, it was impossible to ignore. Because right there, on the front page of the Raleigh Post, was a photo taken from a cell phone, her silhouette against the grand piano, head bowed, hands over the keys, backlit by the amber glow of the chandeliers. The headline read, "Waitress leaves crowd speechless with unforgettable performance." She stared at it for a long time. Then she closed the door, her heart thudding like a drum. At the restaurant, everything was different. People turned when she walked in. Some clapped. Others simply nodded, their eyes wide with the kind of respect she'd never known in this place. Maria, the hostess, practically sprinted over. "Deborah, you broke the internet." Deborah blinked. "What?" "There's video. Everywhere. TikTok, Instagram, Facebook. My cousin in LA just texted me about it. Girl, you went viral." Viral. The word dropped into her chest like a pebble in a still lake. The ripples were just beginning. Even Chef Bernard, who rarely looked up from his orders, stepped out of the kitchen and placed a hand over his heart. "Whatever you played," he said in his thick French accent, "you reminded us we are alive." Deborah didn't know what to say, because in all the years she'd been alive, no one had ever looked at her like this. And yet, not everyone in the restaurant was celebrating. Leonard Grayson sat alone at his usual table, 2 fingers resting against his lips, watching her. His entourage wasn't with him. No jokes. No laughter. Just silence. His eyes didn't mock her now, but they didn't congratulate her either. They studied her, as if trying to calculate something. And Deborah realized in that moment, he wasn't done. He didn't like losing control, and last night, she had taken it from him. But before she could think further, the manager called her into the back office. Rick Carter was a decent man, but rarely emotional. Yet today, his eyes were bright with excitement. "I've had 12 calls this morning from local stations, and that's just the beginning." Deborah shifted in her seat. "Calls about what?" "About you, Deborah. People want to know who you are. A record label rep from Atlanta even asked if you'd consider sending samples. You've got something, girl. Something real." Her breath caught. This couldn't be happening. "And I'll tell you something else," Rick said, leaning forward. "I think we can capitalize on this. Starting tonight, I want you playing the piano here. Regular sets. Tips are yours. We'll even give you a raise." Her hands trembled in her lap. It was everything she ever wanted, wasn't it? But as she stepped out of the office, something in the air shifted again. Because Leonard was still watching. And this time, he stood. Walked toward her. Slow. Controlled. Like a wolf in tailored wool. "I underestimated you," he said softly, and she didn't reply. "You made me look foolish. That takes skill." Still, she said nothing. He tilted his head, then reached into his coat and pulled out a small black card. "Let me make it up to you. I host a private gathering once a month. Music, art, conversation, it's exclusive, very. Only people with influence attend, people who can turn a spark into a fire." He extended the card. "Come, play. You'll thank me later." She stared at the card, unsure if it was an invitation or a trap. And in truth, it was both. She took it without speaking. That night, Deborah played again. This time not out of humiliation, but out of hunger. People clapped before she even sat down. Tips overflowed from the glass bowl. And after her third piece, a man in a sharp navy suit approached and introduced himself as Michael Dunn, a talent scout from Boston who had just happened to be in town. "You've got magic in those hands," he said. "How would you feel about flying out next week? We're holding a showcase, real musicians, real stakes." Her throat tightened. This was what she dreamed of, wasn't it? And yet, a voice inside whispered, "Be careful, because dreams don't always come dressed in truth. Sometimes they wear suits. Sometimes they hand you black cards." 3 days later, Deborah stood outside an iron gate on the edge of town. Leonard's private gathering was in full swing. Laughter drifted over the hedges. A valet opened her door. She walked inside the mansion, her heels clicking against the marble. It was beautiful. Cold, clean, but something about it felt wrong. The air was too still. The smiles too sharp. Leonard greeted her with a glass of champagne and a look she couldn't read. "Tonight," he said, "you'll play for kings." And she did. She sat at the baby grand, surrounded by people with perfect teeth and expensive watches. They clapped politely. But Deborah could feel it. This wasn't about the music. It was about possession. Leonard didn't invite her here to showcase her gift. He invited her to own it. After the performance, he approached her again, a hand on her shoulder. "You're something rare," he murmured, "but rare things don't last unless someone protects them." Her skin prickled. He smiled. "I can give you everything you want, but I expect loyalty in return." She stepped back. His smile faded. "I'm not for sale," she said. His eyes darkened. "Then you'd better pray the world wants you for free." She left without finishing her drink. The next day, rumors began, whispers that she had lip-synced, accusations that she was a fraud, a plant, an internet hoax, anonymous posts online, videos labeled exposed. She knew who was behind it. Leonard wasn't trying to ruin her. He was reminding her who held the matches, And yet, even as the internet buzzed with doubt, people kept coming to La Fontaine. They kept clapping, crying, listening. Because truth, real truth, rings louder than lies. And Deborah's truth had a sound. One night, she got a letter. Not an email, not a text. A letter from Juilliard. We saw your performance. We heard your story. We believe in second chances. Come audition. Her hands shook as she held the paper. She didn't know what tomorrow held. But she knew this. She had played once in the face of humiliation. She had played again in the face of manipulation. And now she would play for herself. No more shadows, no more waiting, just music, just truth. And if the world didn't know her name yet, it would.